Hello, everyone. My name is Seth, and welcome to our first episode, first tutorial, first lesson, whatever you want to call it, of our RPG game making series. Now, I understand that a lot of people that are going to be watching this are probably newer to Unreal Engine 5 or completely new to programming in general. I want to assure you this will be difficult, but I will try my best to explain as thoroughly as I possibly can so that you can understand. And as always, if you ever get confused, ask questions in the comments below. Now, I felt like when I was new to Unreal Engine, I found myself sort of just copying video tutorials or going on blogs or discussion posts or whatever and straight up just copying code, sort of understanding what it meant, but not really. And it took me years to develop that knowledge to be able to program and truly understand what I was doing. And so I'm going to take in those practices that I use or that I learned and try to give those to you so that we can learn together and not just copy. So, the first things first, if you didn't watch lesson 0, what we plan to be doing, as you see in the title, is we're going to be adding in health, a basic enemy, and sprinting into this game. So, first, I think it's going to be helpful to see what we're starting with to be able to know, create an image in our head, sort of what we're going to have. So, the first thing that I think about is this character seems really fast for, supposed to be walking speed, and there is only one set value for this character. So I want to have a walking pace and a running pace, and like any human being, have stamina. So that eventually, if you're sprinting for too long, you're going to have to recover with that stamina. You won't be able to sprint anymore. Another thing is I'm going to be adding in an enemy. The enemy will have no functionality whatsoever. We'll save that for another video, but we need something to be able to apply damage to our character so that we can have health. If I just made the health feature without an enemy, then I wouldn't be able to test it. So we're just going to have that dummy target there, sort of like a cactus that we're just going to walk into and let it do damage to us. Now, first things first, there's going to be a lot of things that sounds like a lot, and we sort of want to break down our goals so we have some sort of direction while we're programming. And to do that, what I usually like doing is either writing on a document or drawing out so we have a visual of sort of what we want while we're programming. So I'll do it for you guys, but you guys can follow along. So I'm going to open sort of a paint document. It doesn't really matter, just something to draw with, and to sort of give us a checklist of what we're going to do. So I know, for one, I want to have that sprinting feature for a character. So I know that there needs to be some sort of walking state. So there's one speed for our character, and this will be our walking pace, and then there will be a running sort of sprinting for our character. Just draw it super quick, and this will be our sprinting speed. And we're going to be going from walking to sprinting with some sort of button input. For us, I'll just use I'll just say a key. Sorry, this looks so bad. And after the sprinting, it's going to have some sort of value. So let's just say 100. And for every second that this person is sprinting, we want to be reducing this value. For every second that they are in the walking state, we want to be recovering our sprint. Okay, and now for our health. So our character is going to have a certain amount of health, and as always, they're just going to start at full HP. And just like sprinting, we're going to keep it at 100 HP. Now, I'm going to try to keep this as basic as I can, just because right now we have no understanding of programming, but we're trying to lay out what we're going to do so we have some sort of workflow or logic to what we're doing. So we're going to have some sort of HP, and it's going to be at some value. Now, this value will change after I take some sort of damage. So if I say something hits me, that HP is going to drop based off of how much damage this does. So then our HP changes. And then we're going to say if our HP is less than 0, we're going to be dead, right? Because we ran out of health. We're just no more. So this is what our sprinting is going to look like. This is what our character health system is going to look like. And the last thing that we planned to work on was our enemy. And so all our enemy is going to do is he's going to stand there. And if you remember in less than 0, there's going to be some sort of collision capsule, so that if there's something that enters within this capsule, they take damage. So this will apply some sort of damage. So let's just say it's going to do minus 20 HP if you touch this thing. And honestly, that's it. That's all we have for our enemy. Yeah, I mean, let's get into it. Let's start with the sprinting, because if you remember, we're going to go to our content drawer, go to our third person character. And if you remember, we already have this project already came with a bunch of code for us to work with already. I'm just going to say right off the bat, this is for gamepads and consoles, as you see in the title, which we will not be using. So I'm just going to delete it because it's just in our way. And everything that I won't be using, we'll organize this more to our liking later. But for now, I'm just going to move it away and work with this one. So this is our movement input, gamepad, and mouse. And the one that we're most interested in is moving forward and backwards. Now, the way that we can change sprinting is, like I said, or like how we planned in this picture, is currently there's only one state, which is just this set scale value. So whatever this axis value is, it's just this one scale value here. And that's its one state. What our goal is to create two states, one of walking and one of sprinting. So that's what we're going to do first. But we see here that to enter between those states, we need to be pressing a key. And you can set it to any key on your keyboard, but I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call it is sprinting. Now, okay, I realized that if you are, I sort of missed this part explaining variables and what they are, but it's going to be extremely important in our workflow and being able to program in general. And if you're new to programming, you probably don't know what a variable is. So I'm going to explain it in the best way that I can. So all a variable is it's telling the computer the value of something. So there's a bunch of different types of variables that you can use. So for example, a Boolean is saying true or false if you hover over that. A float is a sort of number, and we can use these variables and have them inside of our characters or whatever we plan to have. But for this instance, we're going to have them inside of our characters. And what those variables do is they're going to tell the computer certain things about our character, and if they are like true or false. So for example, our health points. So if we go back to our drawing that we made earlier, we saw that stamina is at 100 and HP is at 100. Variables are a way that we can store those values inside of our character so that the game knows what those values are at any point. For example, if I make a variable called health and have it at 100, and if I get hit, that variable will change and it'll let the computer know, okay, our character has this much health, and it tells it to do certain things accordingly. Same thing with sprinting. it's going to start at a certain value that changes. So for us, sprinting is going to start at 100, and it's going to reduce for every second that we're holding that sprint button. And for example, if it hits 0, it's going to tell us that we can no longer sprint. I will quickly go over the different variables, at least the ones that we will be using in this video. The only two, I hardly ever touch every single one, but there are variables that are going to be really common that you will be running into. For now, we're only going to be looking at two, and I already talked about it, Boolean. A Boolean variable is either true or false. For our purpose, right now, you can see that I named this Boolean is sprinting, and that's going to tell the game, is our character sprinting or not? And that's the purpose of this variable, is to tell the game if I'm sprinting or not. Because if I am sprinting, I'm going to be moving faster. If I'm not sprinting, I'm going to be walking. A float is, like I said before, is a type of number. I'm not going to go too in depth with that for now. Both integers and floats are numbers. I'll explain the difference in the future if we ever use it, but for the most part, I just use floats. And floats are decimal point numbers. Any number with a decimal in it is a float. So 1.1, 1.2, 1.0, 0.0, all those are floats. And Booleans are always sort of questions that you ask the game. And like I said, naming is super important in Unreal Engine because you reference things all the time, whether it be variables or a character or an enemy. Unreal Engine always asks for names because it needs to know what is happening to what or what is affecting what. So for here, the convention for variables, or the sort of the way that you want to be naming your Booleans, is to phrase it as a question. So it's is an action, so like is blank with a question mark. So for here, I said is sprinting. So I'm going to drag that in. And I'm going to say get is sprinting. Now, we want to say, we don't care about this one, so I'm going to move this out of the way. We only care about moving forward and backwards, and I'm just going to expand this box so we have more room. So let's expand here. And if we go back to our picture, we remember two things. Now, if I am pressing the key, I want to be sprinting. Whatever key we set, we'll determine that later. If I'm not pressing that key, I want to be walking. So the first thing that we need to do is figure out what key that is. Now for me, I'm just going to say shift. Now Unreal Engine, if you right click, it will open all the actions that you can do for programming. And as you can see, there's a lot. So it can be really tricky trying to remember everything that you need to start these commands because there's just so much. But for our purpose, I know that every single keyboard key is a command. So I can just type in whatever that key that I want to use. So for our sake, I'm going to use shift. And we see here that keyboard events is one of the things that we can use as a key. Now for me, I'm going to use left shift. And here we have an event. Now all I want to do is if I am pressing shift, that key, I want it to change it so that I am sprinting. So we're going to change is sprinting here to true. And as you can imagine, once I release that key, I want to set is sprinting to false. Oh, sorry, I didn't explain that you can just drag it. You can drag these variables on the side here, and it'll tell you to either get or set. Getting will do this. Setting will create this box that will allow us to change its value. So here, we're going to release, and it's going to be false. This check mark meaning true, this meaning false. So every time I press shift, is sprinting will be true. The instant I release it, it will be false. And here we have the start to our two states. So now we have a way to go from, here I'm going to change colors, from sprinting to walking Now we just need that to actually happen. So if I go back, we know that this is just one set speed, and we saw that it was pretty fast, so I'm kind of satisfied with using this as our sprinting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out, I'm going to type in branch. And what branch allows us to do is it's perfect for our Boolean, because I'll just click on it and you'll see that it suddenly breaks our white line that's normally just one straight line that goes into stuff into two different paths. So it will go one way if the condition is true, and it will go another way if the condition is false. Now you can imagine with our sprinting, I'm going to drag this in, and remember I said that you can drag it and choose one. You can also drag it into the holes if it's allowed, and it'll show you a check mark if it is allowed, and X if it isn't. So we see that it's color coordinated. So this is red, so I can drag this in here. Now suddenly, this is going to change the condition. As we saw, there was a checkbox here. That's going to disappear once we plug it in, because this variable already has a true and false value. So if is sprinting, this is how the computer reads it. It's going to read it, the code sort of like instructions from left to right. So it's going to start with, once this event happens, it's going to go to this branch and it's going to read this condition here. Is sprinting true or is it false? And then it's going to move on this line. So it reads it in a flow of left to right, like instructions. So we're going to go here. I'm just going to keep it organized as much as I can, because the instant that all this stuff starts getting messy, it's going to be really hard to read. So let's keep it organized. So if is sprinting is true, I'm just going to leave this as it is. Like I said, the character is already really fast. But if it's false, here's what I'm going to do. I know that this is for movement. Even though I don't know programming, I have no idea what this does. Or even if I have no idea what this does, what I can do is copy and paste it anyway. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing Control C, which is for copying it. Or you can just right click it and you can see this command here, Control C for copying, copy it. And then I just press paste, which is Control V, to paste it on that screen there. So now suddenly I have two different values that I can set. So here, now we have our two paths. If we go back to our picture, we have that key done. So check mark on that key. We now have sprinting done, because if sprinting is true, it's going to go down to that sprinting path. Now we just need to get walking down. So walking needs to be slower than sprinting. And I'm just going to read through this to try to break it down and understand what it's saying. So I see that it says add movement input, and just based off of the name of this box alone, I'm going to assume that means it's making our character move. And if we hover over it, it gives us some fancy definition, but for the most part, the first sentence should explain what it's doing. So it's adding movement input along the given world direction. So it's just moving us in a direction. So we see that here, the direction will have no importance in us in trying to change that to walking speed. So we can sort of ignore this. But we see here that the last thing that this sprinting one plugs into is its scale value. So I'm going to assume that this scale value, even with no knowledge of what this block might mean, changes how fast we move. And what I'm going to do is, I mean, honestly, I can test this. I'll change it. So I saw that the value was 1.0 before. Let me see what happens if I change this to 0.5. Now let's go in the game. And before, if you watch lesson 0, we're going to use those debug lights to see what exactly is happening as we're playing this game. So I'm just going to keep it over that window to make sure I can see these lights while I'm playing the game. Now our character's just sort of moving constantly, and we see what happened when we messed up that value. Now you can see here that I'm not pressing shift, and I see what is happening. So because I'm not pressing shift and I'm not sprinting, it's saying that this value is false. So it's just setting my scale value to 0.5 always, which we don't want. So I'm going to retrace my steps and I'm going to see, okay, what did I do wrong? And I see that this scale value for sprinting is connected. If I hover over this line, it's going to glow. And I see that it's coming from here. So this input axis move forward and backwards gives us a value that we can use. Now, we don't want to be using the same value as sprinting, correct? We want to be using a value that's less than whatever this value is. So what I can do is, okay, I can use mathematical operations to change it. And the one that we will be using, let's just use multiply. So if I type in that multiply sign and press multiply, I can change this value. And let's just do, I know I want to make it slower, so let's make it half the speed. So I'm going to multiply by 0.5 to make it half. And now let's plug into that scale value and see what's happening. So let's close this window, play, and close this window. Let me open that blueprint. Let me close all of this world stuff so I can go back and see that character. Where is he? Right here. So I'm going to press edit blueprint so I can get those debug lights. See, this orange will tell us what's running through the game. And we can see right now that exactly like I said, it's constantly reading if we're moving at all. And since we're not pressing shift or anything, it's saying that we are staying still, and it's going to go to our walking state. So like our picture said, we have everything here. Now we have our walking state it's always at. Once you press a key, we're going to go to sprinting. So let's test that right now. So now I'm going to press shift. First I want to zoom out a little bit more. Now remember, if I press shift, this one will light up. Once I release it, this will light up. So let's zoom out and let's see what happens. So we can see that lights up. Once I released, I'm back into walking. So this is our walking state, and we see that this is much better for walking speed. I like this. If you want to edit it, then you can. But I think this is perfect for walking. And now when I press shift, suddenly we're running. And this is great. So this is exactly what we wanted. The last thing that I want to add, though, is that like every character should have a certain amount of stamina. So after you've been sprinting for a while, we're going to want to end it. And this is where our other variable is going to come into play. Now, let's create a new variable, and we're going to call it, remember, convention of our names is super important, as we will always be referencing them throughout all our code. So the way that you want to be naming your variables is where's it coming from. So I'm going to say TPC for third person character. I'm sort of just copying the name that's up here, BP third person character. So I'm going to call it TPC. If you accidentally clicked out of it and you want to try to rename again, you can just right click, press rename, or you can go over here and rename it. I'm just going to right click rename. TPC, and I'm going to call it stamina. Now I'm going to change this to a float so that we can work with a number. Now we see we're going to press compile because I want to change this value to, if we go back to our picture, you want to start with 100 stamina. That should be our default, right? You don't want to start out tired. You want to start out with full energy, and then we get tired over time. So over here to the right, we're going to be able to change our default value, but it says, please compile the blueprint. If you go to the top left, it says dirty needs to be recompiled. If we just click this button, we can compile it and might as well save it. If your game ever crashes, then you want to make sure that your game is always saved. So now we see that we're able to change our default value. So I'm going to change this to 100. Okay, now the thing that's going to be tricky is we need a way to measure if we're holding that shift key. Even if I'm holding that shift key and not moving, it should still be registering that I am losing stamina. For example, let's just, when I press shift once, I'm only going to lose stamina once, correct? Unless I'm releasing it. So if we go here, let's see what I'm talking about here. Let's look at the shift. Now, currently, what it's doing is every time I press shift, you can see that it only lights up for 1 second, which means the computer is only reading that I'm sprinting once. What I need it to be doing is it should say, as long as I am sprinting, then I should be losing stamina. Not every time that I press shift, I lose stamina. So we need something that's going to be telling the computer or checking if I'm holding the sprint key. And what we can do is there's an event for this, and it's called event tick. Now, an event tick it calls this every tick. It's a measurement of time. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's just what computers use. Every tick, it's going to be checking or running through this event. And that's the start of this event. Now, this is perfect for us because every tick, we can check if we're sprinting or not. Just like how our picture says, are we sprinting? Then we should be losing stamina. So I'm going to do this. And again, we're going to create a branch. Actually, it's going to be exactly the same as this one. So I can just sort of copy what I did above here. And I'll put this down. I have a certain way of organizing. So organize it however you want. But yeah, I like organizing it a certain way. So here, we're going to check every tick is sprinting, and if it's true, we're just going to be subtracting a little bit of our stamina. So if we go over here, we can do set TPC stamina, and we're going to drag it in here, and we're going to do that, and we're going to take that stamina, and we're going to minus it by 5. So we're going to take TPC stamina. We're going to press the minus button. Let's subtract it by... See, the thing is, I don't know how fast event tick goes, so we can mess with this value. But for now, I'll just do like 10. And then I'll plug it in here. It looks like we're needing a little bit more space, so I'm going to move this down a little bit more. And we see here, for every tick, if sprinting, if I am holding that sprinting key, if that is true, remember, this is going to say true until I release it. So it's going to know if I'm holding that sprinting key. So as long as sprinting is true, I'm going to be subtracting 10 stamina. Now it's false. We want to be regaining our stamina. I think that it takes longer to regain our energy than to lose it. So I'm going to say we're going to change this. Oh, all I did was copy and paste. Since these are going to be exactly the same, I'm just doing that Control C, copying it and pasting it. Sorry, that was a bit quick. So Control C, Control V, and then just moving it so they line up. So it's nice and neat. Now, if I'm not sprinting, I should be regaining that stamina. And like I said, I feel like you recover stamina slower than when you lose it. So I'm going to say plus, let's do 5. So it takes twice as long to regain all that stamina. Now, this is perfect. We have everything, but you're going to realize that this doesn't do anything. Because I need a system so that once stamina hits 0, I'm no longer able to sprint. And so what we can do is we can do another branch, and you're going to see why branch is super important here, because look how often we're using it. We're always doing these checks to see if we're allowed to do something. I'm going to move all of this to the side, and I'm going to create another branch here, and I'm going to say if TPC stamina, so I'm going to drag this in, I'm going to get it, and then I'm going to do less than or equal to. So if you press the less than sign and the equal to sign, or just type in less and equal here, 0, perfect, the default value is 0, we're going to plug it in, then I should not be able to sprint. So here I'm just going to set is sprinting to, if I am less than 0, if that is true, then I shouldn't be sprinting. So I'm going to set another is sprinting. I'm going to copy, paste, Boom, boom, boom. Everything is starting to get a little cluttered here, so let me move these things a little bit over. And let's move this stuff over a bit so I can have some room. And we're going to try to keep everything nice and neat. Now, this is just with a lot of experience. It might take you guys a lot longer to be able to organize and stay neat. So this is perfect. This is exactly like how our picture said. We're going to run through our check. So we have a walking state, which is just our default state. So here's our walking state here. If I'm not sprinting, then I am walking, right? If I am sprinting, then I am running. And all of this is controlled by the press of a key. So we see here that when I press left shift, I'm able to run and walk. And the last thing that we needed was some sort of stamina. So for every time that I'm pressing shift, I'm losing that stamina. So I'm losing 10 of that stamina. If I'm not pressing it, then I'm regaining 5. So here we are. And this is the stamina check right here. So if I have no more stamina, then even if I am pressing shift, I'm still walking. If I do have more stamina, then I'm sprinting. And here we are. This is our sprinting system, and we can test it out. What I think will be really helpful for you guys to be able to visualize, I'm going to teach you a really quick trick that you can do that might be able to help you. Right now, we have no idea what our stamina is or if it even works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a way so that we can measure this on our screen. So let's move this out of the way. And since I remember how I said how this will run in sequential order, so it's going to read it from left to right. So I want a way to be able to read TPC stamina without affecting our code. This is going to make more sense because a lot of things, as you can imagine, are going to be wanting to read event tick. So we can create separate lines that won't affect each other by creating this thing called a sequence. What a sequence will do is it'll allow us to be able to read multiple things at a time. So I want to be printing print string. And what print string does is it allows us to show a value on our screen of whatever this may be. So normally its default would be hello. So that means every tick it's just going to say hello. But what I can do is I can go to TPC stamina. And remember how I said you can drag it. It says it's not compatible, but we can drag this in, get TPC stamina. And then if we try dragging it, it's going to say convert float to string. So what it's going to do is it's going to convert the number or the value of our stamina and change it into a value that the computer can read back to us. So if we do this, print string, we can see what our stamina is at all times. And I'll compile and save this. And I'll zoom out. Or actually, I forgot. I have to close that and go back and open it. And we see here that this is our value of stamina. And now quickly, I already saw where we messed up. We left no stamina cap. So now I'm just permanently gaining stamina. And I also realized how fast a tick is because I'm already in the 5,000. It's only been a few seconds. So I need to create a max value for stamina first before we start any of this. We can use this thing called a clamp. So what a clamp will do is it'll keep our values between a certain number. So for us, we want it to be 100 and our minimum to be 0 so that it will never add above 100 or reduce below 0. And as you can imagine, we're going to do the same thing for TPC stamina, like the subtraction for it. So put this here, here, the value, and the same thing, still 0 and 100. And now let's see what happens. So we're going to compile that, save that, close this browser, and we see now this is perfect. Now it's only at 100, just like how we want it. We're going to go back, and we'll see what is running. So now as I press shift, oh, I lose stamina very quickly. So you can see So one thing that I notice is I'm still allowed to sprint at 0. So this is not working like how I wanted it to, but the stamina is reducing and increasing. So what I realized is we probably don't want this to be happening here. When I press left shift, we want it to be happening here. So there needs to be another check to see if we're sprinting. And we're just going to move this branch over. And instead of having it here, where we press left shift, we're going to delete that. So I'm just pressing the delete key. Delete this one. You can press backspace to delete. You can press Control X. I'm going to move all this back. Sprinting is true. We're going to do another check instead. So if we're pressing the sprint key, but we have 0, I shouldn't be allowed to sprint anymore. So instead, this will go to true, and this will go to false. And this should work as intended. I'm going to there's a lot of lines in the way, so I'm going to move this down so that we can read it. Now we're going to compile and save. And now let's check. So now, still not working. Okay, everyone. This is the part of programming that we get to struggle with together. As we work, sometimes we're gonna think a thing is going to work a certain way, but then when we actually do it, it doesn't work as expected, and that's perfect for this example. But I was able to fix the error, and I was gonna go through the thought process with you guys of debugging, so we can work together to figure this out. Now, I realized that an event tick, I know how fast this is happening because I'm telling the computer to print my stamina every tick. So we can see that a tick is happening that fast. The instant I press shift, you see how fast that I'm losing stamina? So I press shift for 1 second and suddenly my stamina is 0. That is happening way too quickly. And so I want to see if there's a way that I can make this happen every second instead of every tick. That is one thing that I would like to change. The other thing that I realized is that I was trying to think about why, even though I'm hitting 0, I'm still able to sprint, and I realized that I used less than or equal to 0, which will always be true, because if you remember what we set our clamp to, the minimum value is 0.0, and this is saying as long as it's less than or equal to. So the first thing I'm going to change is I also used less than when I meant to use greater than. If it's greater than 0, that means that I should be sprinting not less than or equal to 0. So we're going to plug that in, and that's the first thing that we're going to change. The first thing that it's going to say is that I have stamina, which means if it is greater than 0, if my stamina is greater than 0, I should be able to sprint. And I think if I compile and save this should work as accordingly. Yeah, as you can see, I sprint for 1 second. You can see my character jerks. And so we got that sprinting to work, but now we need to find a way to make it so that I'm not reading the values as fast. So I'm going to go back to my blueprint, and I don't think I should be using tick, because tick is just, yeah, it's too quick, and we can't edit the value for this. So instead, we're going to use a different thing, and we're still going to keep everything. We just need a different timer. The code is going to stay the same because this is working exactly how we want it. We want to print our sprinting. We want to be able to see our value. Or I meant change our stamina if we're sprinting or not. The thing is, we need to change our timer. So event tick was going too fast, so instead we're going to make our own timer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say event begin play. And event begin play, you guys are also going to get used to, is just like event tick. There's going to be a lot of instances where we're going to be wanting something to start. For begin play, as you can imagine, once the game starts, this event starts. So once the game starts, this is what this event is saying, I want to set a timer. So I'm going to do set timer. And we see that there's a lot of things here by event, by tick. We already know that tick is too fast, so I'm not going to be using that. By event, we want to do it by function name. Just going to say that right now. And There's a lot of variables that we can change here that are perfect for us. The one thing that we're going to do is time, how long to wait before executing delegate. And what's perfect about this value of time is that, as you see here, it says in seconds. So perfect. Instead of measuring every tick, which is like, I don't know, it was so fast. Let's change this to, let's do 0.5. Let's do half a second. So every half a second, I'm reading this timer. And this timer, I want to go on indefinitely. So I'm going to say looping is true, which means looping means it's going to keep using this timer. So every 0.5 seconds, every 0.5 seconds, every 0.5 seconds, it's going to keep reading. And the last thing that we're going to need here, object, it's already filled in, self. And if you guys remember in lesson 1, self is just our own character. And you can see here it says BP third person character self. So it's just going to be measuring this time for ourselves. The function name is what we're missing. So what a function is if I create, say if there's an event, remember all these red things are events of something. So once something occurs, this code will run. But of course, Unreal Engine can't have every single instance of whatever you want. So instead, we can create our own events by doing this thing called a custom event. So if we type in custom, the first thing that we're going to see is add custom event. And I'm going to change this to something related to stamina, because this is telling us whether our stamina is true. So I'm just going to call this read stamina. If the name doesn't, excuse me. I'm just going to call this read stamina. And if this doesn't make sense, I can always change it for later. But now I can plug read stamina in. I'm going to fix these lines up a bit. Since it's a little bit messy, I'm going to straighten things, keep it more orderly. This line is not straight. There we go. And for the function name here, we're going to be calling read stamina. So I have to type the name exactly, not lowercase. It has to be the exact name. And like I said, again, Unreal Engine really cares about your naming. So now we're going to do read stamina. And so now, instead of having that event tick, I'm reading this every 0.5 seconds by using this timer. And so now, if we go back, compile, instead of having a thing print out every tick and our stamina reducing every tick, now it should be a lot slower and in 0.5 second intervals. So as you can see there, 0.5 intervals, it's a lot more readable. So let's see, now we're sprinting. And it's reducing at a good speed. And now once it hits 0, perfect. And you can tell that I'm still holding sprint because I'm still walking. Now, if I let go of sprint, actually, let me open up that window for you guys so that you can see exactly what key I'm pressing. So I'm going to zoom into the press and the release. So just pay attention to these lines here and what's happening. So as long as I'm holding that, 5, 4, 3, now it's 0. Now I'm going to release. You saw that release key, and suddenly we're regaining our stamina. So now we're going to sprint a little bit, and the instant it hits 0, I'm walking again. And now we regain our stamina. So this is our stamina thing that we wanted to create. Perfect. Okay, now on to part 2. I'm not going to lie, guys. I did create that on the spot with you guys. I had thought initially that this would be a lot easier, but I'm realizing now it's a lot more complicated, and that's another thing about programming. But we did it. If you guys followed along, we did this. This is sprinting, and we created it ourselves. Now, this might not be the best way to do sprinting, but is the way that we know and that we understand. We made this together. So, good job. Good job, everyone. If you're new to programming, this is the first thing that you ever made in a game. Congratulations. Let's move on to our second part. I assure you that these parts are going to be a lot easier than the sprinting feature. That took so long. This one I actually programmed before the video, so I know how to do this. But let's start. Now, the first thing that we're going to start with is let's start with the health. I think that just makes more sense, and we already have an idea of how to create variables now. So here we have our character, and we see that we want the health to start at a default value of 100. So here I already see that we're going to be making a variable, something related to health, and give it to 100. Now every time that I'm hit, I'm going to be taking a certain amount of health points off. And if that health reaches 0, so I see an if scenario here, that means that there's going to be a branch. I'm going to be taking damage unless I'm already dead, correct? So I already know that this is a sign that I'm going to be using a branch. And we see here that this drawing is really helping us have a foundation to lay out what we need to be able to start this programming. So let's go back. Let's go back here, and I already know that the first thing I'm going to be doing is creating a variable called health. So let's go here, and remember, naming is important. We're going to call it TPC health. TPC standing for third person character and health. And I'm going to make it a float, much like this is going to be exactly like our stamina. Remember, guys, compile, save. Let's just save our whole project. I don't know if it auto saves, but you can save it in the top or Control S. That's what I do. The amount of times that I've had a game crash when I'm in the middle of a project really sucks. So just always Control S whenever you think about it, or press the save button. But much like our stamina, we're going to change that health to 100. Okay, and now we have a very convenient tool. I'm going to move this closer to the top so that we have more space. Let's work somewhere on the side here. And there's a very helpful event for this that Unreal Engine gives us, and it's going to be event any damage. And as you can imagine by the name, it's event. Whenever we take damage, this event activates. So we see here that event any damage, it comes with a lot of stuff. So it's going to come with damage, damage type. And excuse me, my dog started barking in the background. I had to mute for a second, but we see that this damage event comes with 4 different variables here. We only care about the damage, how much damage our character is going to be taking. So for this event to be called, there's going to be another variable on the other end giving us inputs to enter into this event. If that makes sense, it'll make more sense once we have the code. But the thing that is doing damage to us, so for our instance, our enemy, so if we go back, there's going to be an enemy. Let me draw him. Oh, actually right here. This enemy is going to be, once I touch it, we see here that if something touches it, this other arrow here, that means we're going to be minusing 20 HP. So this value here is what this enemy is returning. So once I touch this capsule or this enemy here, once I enter in a radius that's considered him hitting me, I'm going to be minusing 20 HP. So what I can do here is with this damage, I can do subtract. So I can subtract this value, and as we learned before, we can drag this in, our TPC health, and we can set our health. As you can imagine, whenever we take damage, we're going to be setting our health equal to, we're going to flip these around real quick. So if you press Alt and click these things, they're called nodes. If you click them, it will break the link. So we saw that it was connected here. We don't want it to connect here. We don't want to be subtracting our damage from our health. We want to be subtracting health from our damage. So we're going to plug in here, and we're going to drag in our health. So if we go TPC health, we're going to plug that in. And so now, whenever we take damage, we're going to be subtracting our health by the amount of damage we took. So let's move that and see here. Now we have that event, and this is perfect for us. Now, as we learned before with our stamina, we can print out our health using the string, and it's sort of helpful. For our sake, we don't need this anymore, correct? Because we know that stamina is working, so we can just delete this, and we'll figure out a way to print our stamina later, but I'm just going to delete this sequence so that we're able to print something else on a string, and I don't want us to be confusing those two values, the stamina and health, so let's just delete that for now. And instead, we're going to be printing our health. So I'm going to say print string, and we can get our health, plug it in. We're going to get, and we're going to put it in here so that it converts for us. And let's just reorganize this a bit. There we go, and move that over the way. Oh, So now we have our health. Whenever we take damage, we're going to subtract it, and we're going to print our health at that point. So we take damage, we print our current health now, and just this works. This is our damage, and that's it. Now we just need a character that's actually doing damage to us. So what I'm going to do is if we go to the contents drawer, let's start a new folder, and let's just call it, oh, I don't want to create a folder there. I see at the top here, all contents third person, it's creating a folder in our third person thing. I want it to be a separate folder. I'm just going to right click and delete this. Yes, I want to delete this folder. Let's click on contents so that we make our folder in here instead. And I think you have to click in this window and do new folder. And there we go. This is where I want our folder. So I'm going to type enemy. I probably should have said enemies. We can change that another time. And now we're going to right click so that we can create our new blueprint class. So instead of our character, we're going to be creating our own blueprint of a character. And we're going to call this BP, which stands for blueprint, and enemy. Enemy. So there we go. We have blueprint enemy. And as you can see, he starts out blank, he or she starts out blank. What we can do is, if you guys remember, this mesh is going to be our model for our character. This capsule is what we can collide into, but obviously I want to be able to see what I need to collide into. So this will give us a point of reference. So for the mesh, if you go to the side, this is our details panel, and we see here skeletal mesh. Currently there is none. If we click on this, we can change our skeletal mesh to one of these characters. So I want to make it different from our character, so I'm going to use the SK mannequin here since we didn't use this one, so that we can differentiate them. And let's move this guy down. Right now we want him to align with our capsule, and he was kind of out of place, so let's do some adjustments so that it's a little bit closer. This arrow, by the way, this arrow here that you see is a representation of which direction the character is automatically facing. And so we can see that even though this is considered the front, our character is looking this way, so let's just turn him. So if I use these arrows, I can move the character around, but I want to be able to rotate. So if we go up to the right here, we see this rotation button, this little refresh thing. We can change our rotation by moving around these green and red things. We only care about the direction our character is facing, so let's just turn that until they're facing forward. So just turn them 90 degrees, and that's perfect. So now if I compile and save, let's start with our event graph. Now, I don't care about any of these events, but over here, we already have an event that this game gave us called event actor begin overlap. Now what this means is that if once the capsule, so this collision capsule, you can see this capsule component is a collision cylinder. If this capsule comes into contact with another capsule, this event is true. So if an actor overlaps with another actor, we see that here, we want to apply damage. So if we go back to our picture, if they touch our capsule, we want to apply damage. And perfect for us, there is an event called apply damage. Oops, apply damage. So here we see, again, now we're going to get a lot of variables that we can change. But what this is going to do is it's going to send over these stats to our whatever thing we're applying damage to. So if we go here, remember that there's these 4 things that it's taking into, this event can take into. We see that the event instigator, the damage causer, the damage actor, and the base damage, we see that there's something similar here. Instigated by, damage causer, damage type. So this is perfect. We're going to want to change only 3 things here. We only care about our damage and what we're applying damage to. So the damage causer is us. We are the guys that are doing damage. So if you remember, to reference self, you just type in self, and that refers to the class that you are working in. So self always refers to whatever blueprint you're working with. So self in this case would be BP enemy. So the damage causer is the enemy. Who is taking the damage, we're going to want to get our BP third person character. Now, the way that you would talk to the game so that they know which character you are, you say get player. This will get the player that's playing the game and one thing about them, whatever you decide to choose. For our instance, we care about the get player character. I want to be doing damage to the actual character that the player is playing. So we're going to get the player and get its character. And again, we're just going to organize this. And the last thing that we need is how much damage we're doing. So since in our picture we said minus 20 HP, let's just say doing 20 damage. There we go. That's it. We're done. Hey guys. Okay, so after a little bit of debugging, and I don't mean a little bit, it took a few hours to figure out what was happening. I realized that applying this damage from this enemy is going to be a lot trickier than I expected. Since we won't be taking damage directly from these guys anyway, I don't think it's going to be super important that we focus on finishing this up so that when we touch a bad guy, because in the future we're going to be using swords and spells and arrows, which is a totally different concept. But I will briefly explain what I changed. Just know that our damaging is working. So what I did is in BP enemy, instead of using event overlap, I realized event overlap, where is it? The one that we were using here before. I realized that this does not work as we expected. For some reason, it doesn't detect collision, and I'm going to be honest, I don't exactly know why. So there is two types of collision, overlap and event hit. So overlap would mean is if these capsules are going over each other between these two. So if we look here, at least that's my understanding of it. And on event hit is if it touches something. It's a whole complicated thing that I won't get into because it's going to be complicated to explain. I mean, I've been researching it for hours, but just know that all I did was change it to event hit instead of event overlap and reconnected it instead, but I kept everything else. So we can see that now, if you go to your content drawer and take in your blueprint enemy, you can drag them into the world just by left clicking, holding it, and dragging and dropping. Since I already have one here, I'm just going to leave it as is. And now if we click play, we'll see what happens when we touch the character. So if we touch it, you'll see that this character instantly kills all my HP. And that's because it's considered this event hit as long as I'm pushing into them. It's going to be, so here I'm holding W, and every single instance of me touching them is going to be doing damage, which is not what I want. I just want a singular touch to do damage. So, but just make sure as well that you have the setting changed, because for events hit to be working, you need to go to your mess, go into the details panel, type in simulate, and check this simulate physics box on any character that you want event hit to work on. So I clicked the mesh, I went to the details, I searched simulate, turned it on for that one, I turned it on for this one as well. Not your capsule, not anything else, your mesh. Go to your mesh, type in simulate, turn those physics on. Now, if you remember for our drawing, we did have in that death feature so that if our character drops below 0 HP, we should be dead. And as we have learned, branches is perfect for these if scenarios, if something is true. So for here, we're going to drag in that health. We're going to get TPC health. And if it is less than or equal to 0, we're going to plug it in. And if that is true, we're going to kill our character, which we can do with the destroy actor. And all that does is, as it says, it's going to destroy our character. And that is our death sequence. So now we can test it. And this should be it. Let's compile, save, run the game. And now if I touch this guy, I should instantly die. There we go. Okay guys, that is it. I know it was a lot, especially for our first lesson, but I hope you all were able to learn something. as always, I know it could be a lot to take in, so if you have any questions or need any help with anything, you can ask in the comments below. If you want clarification as well, I don't mind re-explaining. Or if you're having errors or trouble with your own project, I'll help you with that as well. Any questions you have, feel free to ask them. I'll be sure to respond to every single one. In the next episode, we plan to add in some health bars on the screen and stamina so we can have a visualization, start adding stuff into our UI, and for lesson 3, I hope to be adding in weapons and a playable enemy. So for next week, we should have a functional game where we can kill our enemy can kill us, and we have some health and stamina. So be sure to look forward to that. Thank you all, and congratulations for making it this far. I really appreciate you all. I'll see you in the next lesson.